Hello, listeners. A brief message before you start the show. Unfortunately, Max was suffering from some technical difficulties during recording. It does affect the audio quality at times. We've done our best to clean it up for you. Hopefully, it's still an enjoyable listening experience. What can you do? Those damn gremlins. Mic. Camera. Action.
I killed him! I swear I killed him! Drop your guns!
That chance.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Last chance. Let the hostages go, or you're out of there.
Bring the money here to me, Kogabe!
I'll take the four on the left.
Why don't you take the two on the right and leave the rest alone?
I killed them all! I don't care!
You should take the two on the right. You're not that fast anymore.
The only thing faster is light.
We'll see.
Bullets go faster than blades.
Bring the money here, now!
You want the money? Go get it.
What's that?
In a text.
Welcome back to the Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film from an actor's complete back catalogue, from past debut through to present day in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest to watch and discuss the next entry from their focused filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. For episode 23, I'm joined by Mandatory Max to discuss the 23rd big screen appearance of the Stath in the franchise launching The Expendables. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. So, Max, thank you very much for returning to the show. It's about time we get back together, and there couldn't be a better film, I don't think, for you to bring your expertise to than Stallone, Statham, and all the other names that we have in this. Although we will have to talk about how big a role some of the bigger names play in this, because it was very much sold on it being, this kind of collection of action heroes. And I do like everybody that's in it, but it's not quite the premise that we were promised, I don't think.
Yeah, it's not quite the ensemble piece it's kind of sold as, is it really? It's kind of almost a two-hander, really, with Stallone and Statham, really. They are, without doubt, the two main stars. And Statham, well, again, we'll get to it, but Statham gets probably just as much screen time as Sly does, but the rest of the team are kind of very peripheral figures, aren't they? But even so, just to have those names under one metaphorical roof is especially at the time as well, was a treat, I'll say.
Well, it certainly shows in the box office, doesn't it? I mean, clearly everyone turned up because it was the Planet Hollywood boys getting together for the first time, which is quite mad to think it took this long, because the box office was absolutely massive for this, like 274.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, I think people were just ready for it as well. I mean, if you think back to 2010, I think it is when this came out, this kind of film wasn't really happening. Bourne had sort of been and gone and was, I think we'd had the first 3 Bourne films by then, hadn't we? But we hadn't had his sort of return in Jason Bourne. I don't think we'd yet had the Bourne Legacy, that random film with Hawkeye in that Jason Bourne's not even in. So we'd had them, and obviously Daniel Craig had sort of reinvented the Bond franchise, 4 or 5 years before this film coming out as well. So this type of film, it's very much a throwback piece, isn't it? It's sort of like 80s and 90s action. So I think it was a novelty. It was, the appeal, like you said, of having these iconic names teaming up on screen for the first time ever, or at least sold as such, yes. And I think it was sort of a less refined, unapologetic, not remotely cerebral action film. And I think people were looking forward to sort of being able to see that on the big screen again for a change after so many years.
Yeah, I think two words you've used there are really interesting and are definitely words we can come back to. Less refined. I think we'll talk about the filmmaking style Stallone's gone for here because we know he is a very talented filmmaker, a talented writer, a talented director. He's gone for something particular here and unapologetic, 100%. Like it's going to do what it wants to do, and it doesn't feel. It has to explain itself in any way whatsoever. I think they're two key phrases that we can definitely come back to. Did you see it in the cinema when it came out?
Yes, I remember going opening week. I remember being extremely excited prior to the release. They're so hyped up to see it. You know, it was one thing, return of Arnold Schwarzenegger to the big screen. At this point, he was still governor of California, hadn't been in a film for several years, because obviously couldn't do such a thing, having a full-time political career. So obviously, you know, seeing him in the trailer, that was exciting. Obviously, seeing Sly on you know, he'd rebooted Rocky and Rambo in the sort of preceding years and done well with those, but now seeing him on the big screen again with a new character and surrounded by these great action guys, I remember being very, very excited for this. And yeah, it was so I think it was the opening week I went to see it. Yeah, it must have been. I think I went with a couple of friends of mine. So yeah, yourself, did you go and see it at the cinema, or was it a later viewing? Or
so if this is 2010, I think this would have been later for me. Yeah, because it's just that period in my life. I was 30, and I think I was in the midst of a job transition. My partner at the time may well have been pregnant, or we were certainly at least trying. So it was a very just a busy time in life. I think this probably wouldn't have been as much as I would have been as excited as you. It would have been probably I have to go by myself to go and watch this, and it just didn't fit into the schedule. But I definitely remember watching it like as soon as I could, because by this point, I mean, as is probably obvious, I was a big Stath fan, as well as, of course, a man of a certain age, being a Stallone fan and a Schwarzenegger fan. And I mean, I don't know if maybe not an Eric Roberts fan, but I was a best of the best fan, that's for sure.
Oh, snap. Love that. Love that film.
So, you know, even some of the smaller names, smaller in inverted commas, you know, they were draws too. So he definitely knew what he was doing when he was assembling the cast.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, Stone Cold. You know, I was and still am a wrestling fan. You know, having Stone Cold Steve Austin in there. You know, what a trip that was. You know, Jet Li, of course, Lundgren. You know, what a great throwback, bringing Dolphin, Bruce Willis, of course, Mickey Rourke. Those pre-wrestler days, but at the time he was right back on the apex of his career, and it's vast. It really is. And I think it gets bigger in sort of parts 2 and 3 of the cast. It gets even huger and even more power. It's a fantastic list of names, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad. I think I read it was like 48 hours they had, didn't they, for Mickey Rourke on set. They basically borrowed him from Iron Man 2. And yeah, the first film Dolph Lundgren had been in since Chain Reaction that was going to be on the big screen. And so there were lots of reasons and probably lots of different pockets of fandom that were coming out to see this, absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you feel like it lived up to that expectation? Your memory, I don't know, do you feel like it lived up to it? Did you come out of it buzzing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, watching it back again, it's not. I mean, I'll preface it. I think the sequel is a superior film. I think The Expendables 2 is a better film on every conceivable level than the first one, and the third maybe falls somewhere between the two. And obviously, as we record this, part 4's out in a couple of weeks, isn't it? So we'll see what that brings to the table. But yeah, I remember really enjoying it and rewatching it last week, obviously, before we sat down tonight, rewatching it again. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think it's a perfect film by any stretch of imagination. There are some things that I don't particularly enjoy about it, which we'll discuss. But I think overall, yeah, it definitely didn't disappoint. It was just, I think I would have been very easily, especially back then. I think they could have literally rolled onto the screen and done anything, you know, just fired some guns, kicked some people, punched some people in the face, and I think I would have come out of there going, yeah, this is great. So I think at the time, I'm assuming I would have been 30, 31 when this came out. So I would have lapped this up, especially back then. And now as a, mid-40s guy, I still do, but I think it's with a slightly more ironic, knowing eye, maybe a more critical eye. But yeah, it still does it for me. Yeah, I can't deny it.
Yeah, it's just watchable, isn't it? It's watchable fun, and I think I remember the first time seeing it, feeling like some of the subplots, the Jason Statham romance subplot, and just feeling like why, like just, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit, and where it fits and why it's there and its intentions. But I remember being a bit disappointed by that. But when we get all the big action moments, I felt like it delivered on what it wanted to do, and I still feel the same now, having watched it to prep for this. Now I can't really remember it in comparison to the next two, so I feel like that's going to be a nice journey for me. I don't have quite as strong a memory of like where it fits in terms of quality, but we know who is included in number two, which is going to give it a big tick when Jean-Claude Van Damme appears in the sequel.
Oh yeah, playing a villain called Villain, like Jean Villain or something like that. I think he's called. But yeah, I think the villainous pair in the sequel of Van Damme and the great Scott Adkins, I think is a better villain pair than Eric Roberts and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Nothing wrong with those two. I think they're great, but I think those two work better as because Eric Roberts isn't a physical adversary in the film, is he? He's like a suit and tie kind of guy. There's no sort of epic fight at the end between him and Sly like there is with Sly and Van Damme, and to a very lesser extent Sly and Mel Gibson at the end of the third. But at least it's there. Whereas Roberts is like this, suit and tie bureaucrat CIA rogue agent, isn't he? So it's not quite that physical side of it. So I think you get that more in part two, and they just up the ante a lot more with the ridiculousness and the combat. But yeah, like I said, as a starting point to I was going to say trilogy, but it's soon to be a quadrilogy, of course. I think it's great. I think I did find it very satisfying to rewatch it.
And I think we'll talk about it in depth more. We'll move on in a sec, but I think probably the second film is what Sly wanted to make this time around, because those names you just mentioned were offered parts in this film and didn't take them. Like Van Damme turned it down because he didn't want to do it. Scott Adkins was offered the Stone Cold role of Pain, and I don't know why that didn't pan out. I couldn't find any specific information, but it's really, and he wanted Arnie to be in a more expansive role, and of course he will go on to do that. So maybe that's why the second film is that little bit better, because actually that was his intention in the first place.
I think so. And I think there's a more short-hand directing as well. At times it's hard to follow. It's so heavily edited, and there's a wonderful three-way fight at the conclusion of the film with Statham and Jet Li and what's the guy's name now? It's Gary Daniels. Yeah, Gary Daniels, who plays a character wonderfully called just the Brit. They just they couldn't come up with a character for him. What we'll just call him the Brit. They have a big sort of handlebar mustache, and the three of them have this wonderful martial arts battle. And thinking, wow, if those three are squaring off, you could really make this something special. But he's literally like cutting every second or half a second, and it loses some impact there. I think I don't quite know what he was thinking there, trying to be contemporary or something. I'm not sure what the fad was at the time, without trying to cast my mind back to what else was out at the time. But I don't know. I think for me it does lose a little bit in that aspect.
No, I completely agree. It's one of my talking points was the nature of some of the action. This feels over edited. For me, it's geography. I can't work out where people are at certain points and how they relate to one another. And even in the fight between Jet Li and Dolph Lundgren earlier on in the warehouse, that's just one-on-one. Yes. But again, like at times it feels like Jet Li's going to have to do a couple of flips before he gets to kick Dolph Lundgren, but then they're right next to each other, and it's camera placement. That there's lots of problems in the filmmaking in this.
Every frame seems to be just filled with people, and someone will throw a punch and you don't necessarily see the impact of that punch because you're immediately cutting to next or someone else lurking in the background, let's say kicking another person or something like that. You don't get to stay in one situation long enough. But that's, that's my biggest concern with this film. That's the thing that really sort of I find hard to stick with. Other than that, I think I love practically everything about it. But that, I'm glad we agree on that actually, because it's I don't know, it's just too quick, isn't it? It's too the editing style that still. I mean, Stallone's not edited it, but obviously I'm sure he was very hands-on with the editing, considering he wrote, directed, and starred in the film. I'm sure he was very hands-on with the editing process. But it just, I don't know, there seems to be too many sort of like whip pans of the camera and these really sort of busy scenes. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too old and my brain can't cope with so much overload. But I don't remember at the time thinking that. I remember thinking, yay. But I don't know. I guess I'm just getting too old and need to see more, I guess.
No, I don't think it's an aging. I think you're absolutely right in what you said before about how like it was on trend, wasn't it? With Jason Bourne, as you mentioned before, we were in the choppy action era, weren't we? I watched a documentary last night. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Inferno: The Making of the Expendables, is what is its official title.
No, I think that might be an extra on the
It is
on the Blu-ray disc. I think that might. Yeah. It's like a feature-length sort of making, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about 90 minutes, and
I don't think I've ever watched it though.
No, and I thought, maybe it'll give me some insight into some scenes. I particularly wanted to find out if that was Jason Statham at the nose of that plane as it was actually flying. It wasn't really a behind-the-scenes making of in that way. What it was almost like a diary of Stallone's life as he was making this movie. The Making of Rocky Drago documentary was done by the same documentarian, actually. So if you've seen that, probably will give you a bit of a flavour of what this might be like as well. Very much Stallone being philosophical and talking about his craft, and I find him a really fascinating guy when he's talking about that kind of stuff, because he really intellectualizes his choices and is very good at explaining them, I think. But there is a moment in that documentary, and it's during the big battle towards the end, and it's Stallone talking to the camera operators, and he's doing exactly what you've just done. You're so spot on. I've just found the quote here. He's going, fast, rapido, move that camera around, shaky cam. That's it. Whip pound. That's what I want. Okay, cut. And it's all. So you're dead on. It's exactly what he's asking for.
Oh, well, he got what he wanted then, I guess. I get fair play to the camera crew. They gave the boss what he wanted. You can't argue with it then, because exactly what you just quoted there is exactly what is on the damn screen.
Yeah, and it's a shame, isn't it? Like you just mentioned about we've got this three-way battle. We've got stunts being coordinated by Chad Stahelski in this movie, which I didn't realize until reading up about it. And this is where I do have that bugbear sometimes, where well, then I want to see that, because we know how good his stuff looks when we're allowed to be shown it. It was like talking about Transporter 3 with Dan. We've allowed Corey Yen to choreograph and show the Stath doing these great action moments in Transporter 1 and 2, and yet now in Transporter 3, when Olivier Megaton takes over, it's edit, and we can't see any of it anymore. So yeah, it's something that is becoming more of a gripe for me now as well, going back and watching films from this era.
Yeah, it I don't know, it does make it harder to watch, doesn't it? It just doesn't quite have the same impact. It doesn't age well, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's a shame. But I do highly recommend that documentary. So I know you've got the DVD, or you've got the Blu-ray, haven't you? So it's well worth watching, because I know that you're a big Stallone fan, and if you enjoyed that one about the recut of Rocky 4, he's and seeing what he put his body through and his commitment to making the Expendables as good as it possibly could be is fascinating to see in this documentary. And we'll nitpick and we'll find things we don't like, but it absolutely is the film he wanted to make, and he really put himself on the line in order for that to be the product that we got to see.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, his commitment is unparalleled, Sly. I mean, at this point, he's 64 years old, and he's being thrown around by Stone Cold Steve Austin to the point where doesn't he end up with like a steel plate in his neck?
cracks a vertebrae. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and that's at 64 years old. And you know, you did that wonderful tweet a few weeks ago, the Battle of the Bods with Statham and Chris Pratt. But I think you could throw Stallone in this film into the mix there. I'll give you a third option when he's getting the world's quickest tattoo off Mickey Rourke,
yeah,
which
it's true.
where he turns up with his back and he's not finished the Expendables logo on his back. I think they've just put expend.
That's
and he's
right.
Like, yeah, I'm here to get it finished off. He gets his top off and he's like, and Mickey Rourke's like, oh, brother, you're like a cold piece of steel, brother, and all this. And he looks phenomenal for a man of that age. Well, for a man of any age, let's get real. He looks amazing. But he's literally like tattooing those last four letters on for about 30 seconds, if that. It's like, oh, that's enough. We're finished. I'm gonna have some banter. So yeah, it is kind of weird.
Yeah, he looks amazing, and yeah, that scene is everything about that scene, that interaction between Tool and between Barney Ross is hilarious. I noted down the exact same thing. He does those 5 letters so fast, but I also don't get why the leader of the Expendables is the only one on the Expendables that hasn't got the tattoo. Like Dolph Lundgren's got it on his arm. I don't know. I'm not maybe not only one, but Dolph Lundgren's character has very clearly got the tattoo on his arm. So why is the leader rocking around with Expend? I thought the concept of that scene was just a bit silly.
Yeah, he's like supposed to be like the founder member as well, because even in part 3, I'm jumping off talking, even in part 3, because they established that Mel Gibson's villainous character co-founded the Expendables with Stallone, and he's got the tattoo on his arm as well. So it's like, when they formed the group back in the 80s or even the 70s, did Stallone go, I'll get round to that tattoo. Instead, I'll concentrate on having that really weird sort of Chinese dragon across both my shoulders or whatever it is he's got there, and I'll come back for the Expendables logo. But it does make them the least covert group of mercenaries in the world, though. And you think they're all tattooed up with like the company logo, and even those bikes that they're all driving around as like a, you know, sort of wannabe Sons of Anarchy all the way through the film. The logo is on there as well, so they ain't hard to find. You know, if they make enemies in some godforsaken part of the world, when they do a mission, it's like
Even when Sly's Barney and Stace Lee Christmas, when they go and pretending to be like conservationists or whatever it is, they've got the bloody expendable symbol on the fin of the plane. It's crazy. Yeah, I know, it's funny.
Yeah, they've put like wildlife conservation on the side of the plane, but it's still got the logo, you know. You think like Eric Roberts' character, who's like, you know, ex-CIA, and they've been hired by the CIA to take him out. You think he might know of them, or, you know, as like these private contractors. He might have done business with them over the years. So it's like, come on. But, you know, I suppose that's part of the fun. You've got to suspend your disbelief, haven't you?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think, well, let's talk about something then. So the tone of this film, I think, is really interesting. And this sort of ties in with what's talking about here, because there are some funny moments. And I spoke before about, like, when I first watched it, not being sure where the Stath romance with Cordelia from Buffy and Angel sits, and that weird basketball scene. And I think it comes from where Stallone's been doing the rewrites. So this was a spec script by David Callahan, who does get his name in the credits. And Stallone rewrote that. And then, as this documentary showed, was heavily rewriting all the way through the shooting, like almost every night, and then turning up new pages the next day and coming up with things on the fly, which again shows how creative and intelligent a filmmaker he is. But I don't know how you felt about, there's some really wild tonal shifts, and I think it started off, I think, as more of a satire of the action movie, and then Stallone came in and turned it into more of this kind of hard R, as I would say in America, like 18. I don't know, is it 15 here? Probably 15 here, isn't it? What did you think about those shifts? Did they work for you, or did it feel a bit all over the place?
Yeah, how do you mean? There's all this sort of comedy banter all the way through the film, and you've got the larger than life characters with these ridiculous names as well. You know, it's like you said, there's two scenes in particular that really sort of take you away from the film. One of which is probably, is hands down the best bit of acting in the film, which I'll come to. But the other one is, like you said, the scene with Statham and his sort of on-off girlfriend, who's obviously because of his job, you sort of get the vibe that he's away up pre-work, and she hasn't spoken to him in weeks, so she's moved on. She's got this new fella. He comes around to the house, but she's got this new fella on the go, so he kind of leads him to it. And it's quite bizarre as well that she's like, we've been going together 18 months, and I still don't know what you do for a living. And it's like, well, call me crazy. When you start seeing someone, one of the first things you come up with in sort of when you're trying to desperately think of something to say is, oh, what do you do for a living? So God knows how that conversation went. And then obviously he goes around to see her again, and she's got this really nasty black eye because this new character, this new boyfriend she's got, has obviously given her a punch or something like of that nature. And it's a really quite somber scene, actually. Domestic violence is no laughing matter, and of course it's not played for laughs. Of course, I must stress that it's not handled seriously and with some sentiment, but it's very much out of place, isn't it, from the film? Like, you'd expect him to come home and find her in bed with a bloke or something like this, or like walking on like in the shower or something. That would probably fit more of the tone of the film. And it's just like this really weird out of nowhere bit. I don't know. It's weird because he's the only character in the film of the main team that gets something to do outside of the team's antics and the team's missions. He's the only one who they show anything of his life beyond that. And I don't know what you think. Are they trying to big like Statham up because he's he is the more of the rising star and he's the future of the genre, with Stallone starting to age out of it? Are they trying to sort of put more flesh on the bone for him? I don't know. To me, it kind of just sits a bit unusual in the film. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, I don't think it fits at all. No, I completely agree. And actually, yeah, like the scene I'm going to compare it to, it's a very different style of movie, but something like Armageddon. So when they all get that like one night before they go off to blow up the asteroid, and you do get, Steve Buscemi goes gambling and proposes to a strip or whatever it is that he does, and everyone goes on and does their own little thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, you get snippets of everyone's life and what they're like outside of their missions. But you're right, it's very odd that he's the only one. We get Jet Li's character, don't we, talking about his family, but he's making it all up, just trying to get a pay rise. I don't know. I think that was supposed to be funny too. But yeah, I don't need it in this movie. And I think it was one of the things that when I first saw it, as I said at the start, I think that always bothered me a little bit. I just didn't feel like it sat with the tone, because the banter stuff really works, particularly between Stallone and Statham. That stuff is great, and clearly they're good chemistry and they got on. But when it tries to be funny, to have comedic scenes, it definitely falls flat.
Yeah, I think so. It's it's an excuse to show him, I guess, will be the boyfriend and his 5 basketball playing cronies, and shows him off to be more of a badass. But it doesn't really service the plot as such. Obviously, she's practically. Well, no, she isn't the only female in it, of course, isn't she? Because the general's daughter's a much bigger role, and there's sort of some hint at a possible romantic future with her and Stallone's character Barney, even though he's far too old for her. And I suppose they avoid going down that route by the end of the film. But his motivation for sort of going back into the lion's den appears to be this female character. So the females in the film aren't given much agency, are they? Really? I mean, they're there, to be sort of props and give the boys something to fight for, if that makes sense. Someone to protect. It's I guess. But again, I guess that fits in with the nature of this being sort of a throwback kind of film to sort of 80s and 90s action, because that's pretty much what you were getting in those films in terms of female characters. So I guess in some ways it does fit in with what they're going for in terms of male portrayal. But I guess through a more sophisticated modern eye, you kind of think they're not really doing it right, are they?
No, I mean, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of the mirroring of like the Statham storyline and the Stallone storyline with the two women. I haven't really thought about that before. It's very icky, the Stallone and the Barney and Sandra potential romance. It would have been a lot better if it'd been like a surrogate father-daughter type situation. I think that would have worked a lot more because obviously her dad is the evil dictator of the invented country, and if she'd sort of seen something in Barney that she likes, or he's seen something in a daughter that he hadn't got or lost, or I guess we're getting into rewriting a movie that we don't need to. We don't need to go down that road. It's the movie we got, but also, did he want to add that much backstory? I don't know. When it's easier just to throw in she's fit, and I think she's fit, and this relationship hasn't worked out. He went for the simple plot line, didn't he? Rather than asking us to do some work. But yeah, neither of them add very much. And it's a shame because that Sandra character initially feels like she is going to have something to do. She's their contact when they first get there, and she takes them to when it's the compound. But then she's immediately captured and needs to be saved, isn't she?
Yeah. I mean, she comes across as this sort of strong woman standing up against the father and the tyranny that's subjected the people of this island, but then is literally relegated to damsel in distress, isn't she? At the end, she's even sort of dragged off by the villain through all this carnage. He's taking her with him. That's his prize, or something like that. Before obviously he gets his just dessert. So yeah, it sounds strange. Really. Again, like you said, it might be something to do with the way the film was rewritten, and maybe she had a different arc, maybe, and she wasn't portrayed in quite the same way, and they ended up with something very different.
Yeah.
Another bit that really is a wonderful piece when he does this, this monologue about some horrific situation in, I think it was Bosnia, I think it was referring to, or Serbia, a passion and something truly horrific that happened to him, and he's given this, heartfelt monologue, and at one point, he's in tears at the end of it. Again, it feels very much out of place with the rest of the film, but it is bloody good. I mean, the hands down, that is, as speeches go, that's the two highlights of the franchise, of that and Mel Gibson's speech in the back of the van in Expendables 3 after they've sort of initially captured him before he escapes. That's real acting in inverted commas.
No, I agree with you. It's a stunning moment, and to know that he was only there for a couple of days, and he is kind of playing, I suppose, the same character he's playing in Iron Man 2. He's certainly styled the same. They didn't have time to do anything about that. But yeah, the level of emotion he manages to find in that scene is full of weight and gravitas and truth, but then we cut to jaunty silliness and buddy banter and CGI blood. So yeah, it is another. You're right to pick that out alongside the basketball scene and the subplot romance for different reasons, but they really, I like your phrasing, they pull you out of the movie. What I do like it when a movie or a script or a comic comes up with like an invented bad guy island, James Bond bad guy island, or an invented country which we can go to. So we get Valverde, which is the famous one from like Commando, and it's referenced in Die Hard 2, isn't it? And Stephen D'Souza says he believes it's the place where Predator's set, although obviously later continuity seems to dictate that. But we get Genosha and Latvia and all those kind of places. So I do like that we go to the island of Valena here, and we get this invented place where we can go to, and we can not worry about pissing anybody off.
Yeah, that's always good, isn't it? A fictional country. They've insulted the Somali pilot enough at Statham. So the actual sort of majority of the film will just make a fictional race of people. Out of it, they never mention it, and that's very wise at times, I think, when you're portraying them in a bad light and basically slaughtering them by the boatload, like you do at the end of this film. I think it's very wise to keep your mouth shut as to where it's supposed to be. But again, like you said about the films where to make up these place names, and it is, like you say, a very comic booky thing to do, but they don't tend to do it in films. Really, films are not set in fictional nations other than fantasy films, obviously, and things of that nature. But films that are supposed to be in the real world, which the film is in the real world, you don't have fictional nations. So I like that. It's a nice touch. It's a nice touch, and it allows you to not. allows you to almost not care.
It does. It definitely does. The soldiers are weird as well. They're like school bullies. There's the scene where they're like driving down the road, taking Eric Roberts' character. I can't think of his name at the moment. What is he called?
Monroe.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah, taking Monroe like back to their compound, and there's a broken down like fruit and veg truck or something, isn't there? And they're like getting out, and they're like school bullies, like, come on, move out the way, and they're pushing them over. It's another kind of strangely comical scene when really there should be something quite fierce and scary going on there. Because then when we compare that to how they treat Sandra when they capture her and they're waterboarding her, and it doesn't. This is again back to this tonal shift. Sometimes they don't always quite match up.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, they kind of, they're neither one thing nor the other, are they? There's even I think Monroe even says at one point, he refers to the fact that the men have been trained by pain by Stone Cold's character. He says, how can you explain by the men that were trained by this gentleman here? And he's supposed to be like this ultimate, fucking evil military hard case, isn't he? But yeah, they're kind of neither one thing nor the other. And as in all the best action films, they are utterly incompetent as well, aren't they? There's 100 of them against 5. 5 Expendables team members, and they much as a scratch. But
How do you feel about the fact that in a movie called The Expendables, none of them are expendable?
I mean, yeah, and that's throughout the. Well, actually, no, it isn't actually. There's a new character introduced in the second one is purely there to die. But yeah, I know what you mean. They're supposed to be like they're expendable. That's the name of the team. So they go on these missions where they could all die at any given moment, but there's never any real sense of peril for any of them, is there?
No.
Maybe Stallone when he's getting his ass kicked by Stone Cold, and he refers to the fact that he got his ass kicked as well, which is, I guess that's something quite, because if he'd have sort of gone hand to hand with him and come out as the victor of a man that's 20 years younger and probably about 100 pounds heavier and probably about a foot taller as well, it would have sort of stretched the limits of your imagination to Rocky IV proportions. So yeah, I suppose that's quite good. But yeah, sorry, going back to your question. Yeah, it's kind of strange that there is no real sense of danger and stakes. And yeah, no one truly is expendable. It's weird, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's a bit of a missed trick, isn't it? I think Dolph Lundgren's character Gunnar was meant to die in the original draft, but because his performance is great, his performance was so good, I think they changed the script in order for him to be able to survive. I don't know. I mean, it's not a big deal. I think it would add the film an extra bit of weight, wouldn't it? That you get that Men on a Mission movie and the one man that didn't make it back, or I think of something like Navy SEALs with Bill Paxton and Michael Biehn, and the end of that movie, and Charlie Sheen, like the end of that movie, not everybody makes it back, and it lends that mission they've gone on so much more weight.
Yeah, I think they could have killed one of the team off in that last battle, and it would have if they'd have gone back rather than the sort of party back at Tool's place with a knife throwing and everything. If they'd have had a fallen brother, so to speak, I think that wouldn't have been a bad thing. I don't know who I'd have picked though to not make it. I don't know who do you think would be the best choice?
It's tough, isn't it? Because when I love Terry Crews, and he's playing Terry Crews again in this, but he's always great. That man deserves his own franchise. I guess Randy Couture would be the obvious choice of who we've got in this, but he gets his nice moment, doesn't he? Overcoming Stone Cold's pain after, and I love that you said that, and I think that's really important that Stallone is willing to get his ass kicked, and be open about it, because we're in an era now, aren't we, where everyone's invincible and people have written into their contracts that they have to have the same number of punches and all this kind of stuff. It is really cool that Barney just gets his ass absolutely whooped and owns up to it. I think that's great. But I guess Jet Li, maybe, because he's Jet Li, and that would be really shocking. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Jet Li would have been the right choice. I think because I think if Terry Crews or Randy Couture being killed off. They're like the most minor members of the team, aren't they? But yeah, I think if he said I'd kill Jet Li because he plays such a minimal part in part 2 and 3 anyway. He's only in the very opening of part 2, and he only shows up hanging out the chopper at the end of part 3. So I don't think they would have missed out on much if they'd have killed him. But I think he would have been a good choice as well. Particularly with him sort of talking about the family he has or doesn't have and all this, and how he sort of escapes death once at the hands of Dolph because Sly's involved and all that. So I think that would have been a really good narrative choice. Actually, I would have liked that. Yeah.
And with the opening credits, we get Stallone, Stath, and Jet Li, and then it kind of stops, doesn't it? And then we get the title. They're the above the title names, and then we get everyone else. So I guess it maybe would have been unexpected as well because he's the third character. He's he's important. He is ostensibly the kind of the third lead of the team, isn't he? So, you're right.
Yeah.
Either of the other two characters aren't important enough in order for it to have enough weight.
Yeah, I think so. I think it, as long as it was done in like a tasteful way, and they don't make some Chinese joke or something at the end of it, and it gone out like a hero. I think it would have been a choice actually. Yeah, I would have not liked to have seen Jet Li, but I think it would have been a bold choice. I think, and would have worked.
You never know. Well, we may circle back around to this conversation when we discuss Expendables 4.
I think so. I think that's the way they're looking at it, aren't they? Especially with the billing, with Sly being not first on the call sheet, but he's last with the Sylvester Stallone, and he's said himself this is his last appearance as Barney Ross. So he's either getting killed off or retired off. So yeah, I don't think Barney's going to survive this one. But we'll see. I guess we'll see in a couple of weeks when it comes out if we're right.
And maybe they're just playing with us, right? Like all those Marvel trailers used to do.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope so in a way though, because I really don't want him to end up like that. If he has to step away from the franchise, fair enough. I mean, Sly's not getting any younger now. He's in his late 70s at this point, so you're stretching the sort of the believability to literally to breaking point now with Sly, even though you can still buy him as a tough guy, but perhaps not in his Tulsa King show. I think that's the perfect fit for him now, where he's playing a tough guy but not an action guy, whereas if he's supposed to be still this elite military mercenary, you kind of, I mean, let's face it, you were in part 1, let's be honest, but you get away with it because he's Sly. But now we're 13 years on it, you're really at the end of that road. So, I do hope there's not a bleak end. But we'll see.
No, 100% agree with that. That he's fantastic in Tulsa King, isn't he? It's a wonderful show, and he's so good in it.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't wait for season 2.
But he could also become like the tool character, couldn't he? He's the guy that sends people out on the mission, much like, I don't know, we've had Dead Reckoning 1, but whether we're going to get it in Dead Reckoning 2, Cruise is saying that's his final Mission Impossible movie, isn't he, as well? So whether he's leaving that franchise permanently or whether he's not the leading man anymore and he becomes the TV series Jim Phelps type character, Stallone could go sideways, couldn't he, and become send you out on the mission, and Stacy Lee Christmas steps up and becomes the leader of the mission.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, it's just the fact that he has said this is his last appearance. So, but that's not thinking on the proviso that there'll be another film. I mean, obviously, if there is a fifth film, depends on the success or lack thereof of this fourth installment, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not going to greenlight a fifth if this absolutely bombs. So it'll be interesting to see. I really hope so. I mean, I'll watch as long as Sly's upright and drawing breath. I'll buy him as a tough guy. Same with Arnold Schwarzenegger as well. I'll still, even now, Schwarzenegger, just put the leather jacket and shades on and do Terminator 7, please. I'll be first in line for it. Even though that's not going to happen either. But yeah, I can't get enough of Stallone. I think he's superb, and I think he mostly wrangles this film well, apart from the things we've already mentioned. But I think he does showcase his mate Jason Statham very well in this film, and it's as much the Statham show as the Stallone show, isn't it?
I agree. And, it has been a case of diminishing returns for the Expendables franchise. It has been slightly less each time. So you're absolutely right. I guess what they're probably waiting to see, is there a hunger for this again or not? Before we get to the Stath, though, as you just mentioned, the Austrian oak himself, we need to talk about Arnie. We need to talk about that scene that combines him and Willis and Stallone together for the first and only time. Do they share a scene again, the actual three of them together in a scene in the sequels?
I think there's one scene in the sequel after the huge sort of airport shootout. Yeah, that brief exchange by the chopper in part 2, it's a nice little scene, but it's not on the level of this scene that's in the original film. I think this scene is superb, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know if I can decide how much I like it and how much I don't. Now, what I do know that I really like is this Willis. I just miss this Bruce Willis so much. And I know we're not going to get it again because of his health issues. But this cocksure, wisecracking, like nothing can touch me. I love Bruce Willis when he's in that mold. And just for the few minutes he's on screen here, he's that Bruce Willis again. And the smirk and the laugh after he delivers his improvised line, actually, of you're not going to go suck each other's dicks. I think obviously it's acting when we see Stallone and Schwarzenegger react to that, but he did that in the moment, if rumors are to be believed. So maybe the faces they're pulling when they're acting are actually the real faces they pulled when he dropped the line on them without them expecting it. But yeah, seeing this Willis is wonderful.
Oh, I completely agree. It is great, and like you said, it's such a shame that what's obviously happened to him in recent years, and it's a tragic way for his career to end, and being on his own terms. But what a career he's had, we must say. But yeah, it just, again, you can't underestimate the significance of getting those three guys in the same scene together. The three, for years, the three men that defined action cinema, for better or worse, but they did. And to have the three of them there together, it's not an action scene. It's a dialogue scene. It's only probably about 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, Schwarzenegger did it on his day off from being governor of California. They filmed it in California in a church, and he just came down for the day and did it for neither of them got paid, apparently. They just did it as a favor to Sly for this. I'm sure they got paid well next time, but for this one, they just did it as a favor. But yeah, I mean, it is great, and the banter and the charisma as well between the three of them as well. I mean, like you said about Bruce Willis and the charm and the arrogance and the stuff he goes out with. But yeah, it's a magical scene. It's one I could watch in isolation. I don't have to sit and watch the film, just watch that clip on YouTube. I recommend anyone who's not seen it to just watch it. It's readily available out there to see. And it's just three of the very best in the business. Just, they look like they're having so much fun with it as well, don't they?
And I can't disagree with anything you said. I think you're absolutely right. And your enthusiasm is the right level of enthusiasm for having these three iconic actors together. I guess it's reality versus expectations. It's what is great, but what obviously I would want would be gigantic, would be, So considering what they could do with the time that everyone had, that Arnie's just popping in when he can on his day off, when he's doing it for free, I think it's a lovely little scene. I guess, I can't help but want a bit more.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, we get that bit more in the sequel with obviously Arnie and Bruce, fully playing a part at the end and getting involved in the fight and all the rest of it. So we do get that. We just had to wait for the sequel. But I mean, you just cannot underestimate seeing, when I think back to sort of 11, 12-year-old me, when I was, just sort of worshipping at the altar of Die Hard and Terminator and Rambo and Rocky, and then thinking, my God, these three guys will actually appear in the same film together. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I mean, you are absolutely going to play that up, aren't you, in order to get bums on seats? Of course you are, and you can't begrudge them that they use that as a little marketing ploy either.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? the time, it was a massive coup to get Arnold Schwarzenegger, who sort of retired from acting a few years before, obviously since subsequently gone back to it, but put his career completely on hold. So to get the two of them, it was a real coup for the film. Like you said, it's good marketing, and they're not quite playing much of the part, but just to have them in, you can't not play on it, and you can't not put them in the trailer, and you cannot not put them and things like that.
No, absolutely not. It's the action movie equivalent of Pacino and De Niro in the diner in Heat, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is, isn't it? Really, yeah, because you think that's kind of virtually the only time those two play off each other in the film, apart from that kind of shootout at the end of the film, and that's it. And it was obviously again heavily marketed as finally these two heavyweights will meet as equals on the screen. Forget Godfather 2, where they were in it, but they were in different timelines. So to actually have that was, but again, it was not quite this level of interplay we thought, but what we got was very special. And in this case, it's not quite on that level of the Pacino De Niro diner scene, but it's still a very special moment. And I begrudge anyone unless they've got a complete heart of stone, or just like, or hate life so much that they can't just watch something without breaking it down and debating it and trying to put an intellectual spin on it. Just watch it and enjoy it and appreciate the fact that these three titans are there. That's what I say.
Yeah. So the man that would be king, Jason Statham, as you said, and I think you put it in a really nice way, you can tell that Stallone really respects him and what he can do and what he's bringing to the industry, because he really puts him front and center in this movie. I mean, I haven't totaled it up, and it's probably out there on the internet somewhere, but it does feel like near enough equal screen time. He really is celebrating what he can bring to the screen, isn't he, in this movie? And I think he does a good job. What about you?
I think it's a real not career defining, I'd hate to use that word, but like sort of career enhancing role, if that makes sense. It just shows you do a bit more than just be that kind of glowering Cockney transatlantic hard man, and do humour, but also kick a lot of ass at the same time, and show all the charisma that we come to expect from him in this film.
Quite a milestone, do you think, maybe?
Yeah, I do, because you're basically putting him in with the who's who of his, for want of a better word, predecessors, I guess, from the previous era, and he is as the spearhead of the current era at this time, and you're giving him as much, if not more, than anyone else in the film, and he's carrying it. He's carrying the film. Like we said, he's the only one who gets anything to do outside of the team. Stallone could have done that. They could have showed scenes with Stallone going around to see his ex-wife or something, and like they're doing a lot of these films where he goes to see the ex-wife and she bemoans the fact that his career cost their marriage and all the rest of it, or something like that, and how he was never there and all the rest of it. But they don't. They give it to Statham and they give him the meat on the bone. But I think his performance is great. Wonderful character name, Lee Christmas. Do you think that's the code name, or do you think he is actually called Lee Christmas? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I do like it when Church calls out Barney Ross, doesn't he? And he says, like, I know that's not your real name. So I'm guessing they've all come up with their own code names, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I must ask you about this as well, because I was watching it and thinking his delivery of poem / tool. It's like it was a real, and Jackson can be sort of pick and mix at the best of times, but Jesus Christ, I can't, the way he delivers some of the lines, like I can't remember the lines of the monologue now. It's like tool. Good with a knife, bad with a wife, or something like this.
It is. That's exactly right.
Comes out the line about dreaming he'd defeat me or something. Yeah. And it's like, are you really like trying to stay Cockney, or are you really trying to be an American? It's so weird, that delivery, but I do love it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but make the comparison to Tom Cruise's Brian Flanagan in Cocktail, because he constantly gets up on the bar, doesn't he, and does these. I think he's called like the poet bartender or something like that in that movie. Stath doesn't quite have that fluid delivery here, Oh yeah, it is another classic Stath accent where like times he's full on Jason Statham fake Cockney, at times he's Jason Statham fake American. I think I've just got so used to it now. I don't even really notice it if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's he's carved out his own little niche, hasn't he?
Mm.
Of that accent. It's kind of the definitive mid-Atlantic accent where he's neither one thing nor the other, kind of like Pierce Brosnan used to be, where he was kind of sort of a bit of both, so to speak. But yeah, it's his thing, isn't it? And like you said, I mean, you are the Statham connoisseur. You are the king of all things Statham.
Yeah, yeah. What what I think I really like in this movie from him is how relaxed he seems. As you said, look, he's acting opposite Stallone, one of his heroes, one of his admitted heroes. Why he wanted to get into the type of films he's in. He's got Dolph Lundgren sitting in the corner. There's Jet Li there. We know how big into martial arts. I know he's a big Bruce Lee fan, but he must be a fan of Jet Li as well, of course. So he's surrounded by
Yeah.
all these people. He's got scenes with Mickey Rourke, and he just seems really comfortable in his own skin. I particularly like the scene when he turns up after being rejected by Charisma Carpenter's character, by Cordelia. Well, I'm just going to call her Cordelia. I think it's Lacey, isn't it? When he gets rejected by Lacey, and he comes back, and Tool's like ribbing on his head. He's like taking the piss out of his head, and he's like, "I'll put a spiderweb tattoo on your head," and I'll because it's such a defining trait of the Stath is his kind of silhouette and his hulking shoulders and his bald head, and it all goes together with the accent. And I think he's almost certainly now he's almost somebody you could recognize from these kind of traits, and well, that's not the right word, from these kind of attributes. You can see that outline of Indiana Jones. Do you know what I mean? When the trailers come out, they like to show us him putting on the fedora, but through a shadow or in silhouette, or like, and oh yes, it's Indiana Jones, it's the hat. Like I feel like I could see the silhouette of the Stath or the shadow of the Stath like cast onto a wall, and I would know it was him just from the shape of who he is.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He's become iconic, hasn't he? And I like what you said about him being so relaxed in this film. He does seem so at ease, and he has like a really sort of not lazy charisma. That's a really bad word, but he has this kind of like he's so laid back in the film, isn't he? He's like, despite the fact that they're in these life, his character goes through it a bit, I suppose, with the girlfriend Lacey and the obviously the life and death situations are in, but he smiles so much through this film as well, which isn't again that's not a big Statham trait in the films. The films he's in, he doesn't traditionally play the happy-go-lucky character, and he doesn't smile a lot in films. But in this, he's constantly laughing at other people's comments and smiling away from it. I think it's like I said before, it's a really great role for him. I think it's again, I mean, he's coming back to play it a fourth time now. He must like it, but I think it's just great. I think it's a perfect role for him. Like I said, it's that transition between the career we had before and the career he has now. Obviously, starring in blockbusters like The Meg and things like this.
It feels like another. It does feel like another, not turning point, but I think there will have been people that maybe weren't aware of him, despite the successes he had up until this point. And this is another big step to be with his idols, to be brought to the attention of a lot of different people from different areas of fandom that perhaps hadn't been exposed to him before, despite him already being an action star. But being Sly's number two for the Stath is a big deal in so many different ways. And yeah, I love that point about the smiling and the laughing. He just radiates charm in those moments, and he looks, and you said it, just so full of joy, and you could just feel it watching it. You can feel like he must be having a great time on set. He's so happy to be with these people, and it makes his character feel that way. And it's definitely true. Like in the moments, like at the start when they're facing off against the pirates, and he's like, "I'll get the four on the left," and they have the banter about, "No, you get the two because I'm quicker than you." And the way that his character then feels in these moments, as you said, that are life or death, totally makes sense for Lee Christmas to be a little bit blasé, because that's who he is in all walks of life. He just kind of takes things as they come, and nothing rattles him, and he finds the joy in the little moments. And yeah, I think he makes more of a character than probably what was on the page.
Agree with that. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, this is probably you'll know better than me, but I think at the time this must have been the highest grossing film of his career to date at this point. I would have thought. Oh no, I know he's been in bigger films since then. Obviously, the ones we've mentioned like Fast and Furious and Mega films, they must have been on this. But I would imagine at this point in his career, he hadn't been in a film that had made this much money worldwide at the box office, and he's the verbal star of it.
Yeah,
I think he probably realized maybe at the time what an opportunity this was for him to cross over. Because like you said, the films he'd been in this point, all good films, all well-made films, but not on this level of stardom and exposure worldwide. I mean, this film was number one in the US box office, the UK box office, other countries as well. I think China as well, which is a massive market. Yeah. So this is like an international smash hit, like nothing he'd experienced up to this point in his career. So I think that translates into his performance, really. I think he's like thinking, wow, I've kind of won the lottery here, to be amongst such a esteemed company and to have arguably the best part in the film. I think his part is the best part in the film. I know it's Stallone's baby and his creation, and he is calling the shots, especially in this first film. But I think Lee Christmas is the best character in the film by far. He's the most appealing. He's the most likable. He has the most to do. He has some of the best lines. He has a lot of the biggest moments in the film. And it even comes down to the end where they both kill the end villain at the same time.
Yeah.
You think it's going to end with this sort of Stallone and Eric Roberts at the end, and it kind of does. But again, I saw the hell out of the film, so I shouldn't really worry too much about spoilers. But the way it ends is they both do something. They both do something to Eric Roberts to kill him simultaneously. I mean, who would have thought that? It would have, traditionally it would just be. I suppose it is in parts 2 and 3. It would be Sly one with the villain and taking him out. Whereas this is like, I'll take him from this side and you take him from that side, which kind of mirrors the start of the film, what you were just saying then about, I'll take the ones on the left, you take the ones on the right. They kind of do that at the end. It's really, again, I've only just thought of that, actually. It's quite clever foreshadowing. Although maybe I'm giving Sly too much credit there. I don't know.
No, I think that's genuinely good writing there. I think that's total setup for what's going to happen later, and is definitely an attempt. I think it must be an attempt by Stallone to give Jason Statham as much of a impactful moment in the movie. It really is like you are, as you just said, we are all, he is his second in command, but it's almost like we are equals. We are as reliant on each other to succeed and to survive. Like we both be dead without each other. It's definitely that. It's not a Batman and Robin. It's not. Barney is the leader, but he would be dead if it wasn't for Lee Christmas, and vice versa. Definitely.
Oh yeah, they save each other's life during the course of the film. There's scenes where they both save each other's life. So yeah, it's like Batman and Batman, isn't it? Really, that's how I see it.
And you're right. I looked at the figures as you were talking. So this is 50 million more box office than Collateral, which isn't obviously really a Jason Statham movie, but he is in it. And it's 100 million more than The Italian Job, which is the next nearest. So it's a significant jump for him.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. This is what, in my opinion, this film is what propelled him from being, a highly sought after and recognized and appreciated action star. But I think this puts him in that bracket of bankable leading man, I think.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And most reviews or most opinions seem to fall on either it's his movie or it's Lundgren's movie. I know his is a much smaller role, but I think people were excited about him being back on the big screen, and we know what a good actor Dolph Lundgren can be when he turns up as well.
Yeah, he is actually. He's a lot, I guess a lot of his career roles haven't given him the chance to showcase what he can do. I guess like a lot of action men, really, a lot of them,
And do you think Lee Christmas is the best character name out of the wonderful array of names we've got, would you say?
It's either him or Yin Yang.
Fantastic, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Jet Li's character. Yeah. Probably either of those, I would say. Yeah, Lee Christmas or Yin Yang. But they're all good, aren't they? You know, like we said before, Hail Caesar and Toll Road. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Arnie too. He's Trench, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. Trench Mauser or something like that he's called. Yeah.
All right, just before we finish off, I thought I'd play a little game with you, if that's all right.
Oh, yes, please.
So, as you said, Stallone obviously was involved in very many aspects of the filmmaking here. Did you notice, or can you guess, how many times his name came up during the opening credits?
Oh, I think what else he could be credited for other than acting, directing, and maybe producing. Well, I'll guess four. Go on.
I mean, you're spot on. You're spot on with the number. Good work there. We get before the anything, we get a film by, then we get actor billing, and then we get his screenplay by along with David Callahan, and we get directed by. He wasn't actually a credited producer on this one.
Oh, right, okay. So we get filmed by and then directed by, which is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. You get the bookends.
Oh, gee. Well, I suppose when you're running the show, you can give that, can't you? I suppose, yeah. I suppose he didn't credit himself as like stunt coordinator or I don't know, something else. But yeah, oh wow, 4. That's got to be up there in terms of individual credits for anyone.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. What a guy.
All right, I'm going to delve into Letterboxd and I'll get your opinion, your final say on where you think this lies in the Statham filmography, and then I'll let you go. Okay, first up today is Lou Shoemaker. I kind of like the idea of getting a ton of macho action stars together and making an old school action blockbuster like they used to make all the time in the 80s, but this movie doesn't feel like a throwback at all. It should have been something like Space Cowboys, with older iconic actors teaming up to show the young guys how it's done. Except for Stallone, the cast is like mostly young guys, and the icons are relegated to cameos. Even ignoring the metatextual elements, the movie itself is stale and uninspired, although I kind of appreciate that you can just tune out for like 15 minutes and not miss anything important. I have no idea why they made Jason Statham a co-lead in this. He's not old enough to be in Stallone's league and not young enough to be a protege, but he's easily the best part of the movie. He gets this whole subplot revolving around this sort of girlfriend who assumed that they had broken up after Statham disappeared on a months-long mission. Of course, her new guy turns out to be an abuser, to give Statham an excuse to beat the shit out of him. The whole thing is weirdly domestic and small for a big budget movie, but it also gives you the only memorable scene in the entire thing. Slightly more positive is Travis Little. Without a story compelling enough to hoist its attention-grabbing cast and bone-crunching set pieces to glory, The Expendables comes across only as a worthy concept mired in mediocrity. Recruiting names like Jet Li, Jason Statham, Dolph Lundgren, Terry Crews, and a stellar cameo or two, Sylvester Stallone puts together an action thriller all dressed up with great faces and no narrative where to go. Thanks to its lack of an intriguing plot and cheap filling production, the film lands as something flat and, well, expendable. Maybe not more positive, but the star rating would lead you to believe so. Old man Angelo, he's definitely more positive. Schlocky, haphazard, dorky as hell, an absolute mess. I love it. This film was very much Stallone making it up as he went along, and really, it's perfect for the oddball nature of the cast and their characters. We get some great turns here, from a self-depreciating Sly, a more laid-back Statham, Jet Li channeling a neurotic Woody Allen, Drill Sergeant Steve Austin, and of course the MVP, Mr. Dolph Lundgren, who chews through the scenery with aplomb and won't let up throughout the whole franchise. It's fun going back to this and seeing the very obvious work of Chad Stahelski in the choreography and action. Perhaps they can bring him back and direct part 4. Let them go out with a real bang. As we know, unfortunately, Chad isn't the director of part 4. But we reserve judgment on the job that Scott Wall, does do in the movie until we see it. Zaleski is probably too big now. The final one. Short and sweet, Charlie says, solid action movie that's just worth watching for its action scenes, and thankfully there are a lot of those. Statham steals the show for me. Charlie knows what's up and agrees with us too. So, Max, what final say you?
Okay. So I think then, if we're judging it not as a film in isolation, but against the specific Statham filmography, then I think it has to be classic. I think it has to be. Stallone is a shorthand, like some minor editing style and what have you, but I think overall it worked really well. I think there's better to come for this particular franchise. If you'll have me back to this part 2, I guess in the future we'll go into that. But I think as a franchise starter, and for the amount of star power that's in it, and the nostalgia factor, the novelty factor, I'm going to put it in terms of Statham's own work, classic for me.
Great. I mean, I will definitely have you back for part 2 if you're putting yourself. I want you to come back, and that's good because that means it's a step up from you. So you gave Ghosts of Mars a worth catching, so now you're getting into the realms of the classic Statham appearances, and long may that continue.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a quantum leap from Ghosts of Mars, if I'm being brutally honest. Although I do have a spot for Ghosts of Mars, but yeah, I think this is where Stallone, forgive me. This is where Statham takes the leap towards the A-list, I think.
I think it's totally fair to say. Bro, mate. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is coming out on the 18th of September. What have you got coming up around then, or coming out around then? We've got a mandatory music and CD to look forward to.
Yeah, we're trying to schedule the next episode has been an absolute nightmare. Between the three of us, myself, Tony and Dave, we always pick a date, and then one of us, it seems to alternate who that is, will have something going on in their life, which means it has to be postponed. So we were going to record this week, but Tony's waylaid with work and what have you. So the date is TBC at the moment, depending on when Tony can find a window for us. But as and when he is, we will record. We are going to be, our next episode will be covering the classic Iron Maiden album, The Number of the Beast, which is a very special album for me. It's one I picked. It was my pick. So I very much look forward to delving into that with those two guys. So look out for that on the Comics in Motion Network feed. Hopefully it should be out by then. If it isn't, I'm very sorry. I have tried. If not, it will be out very shortly after then.
So we'll just be getting a double dose of you. That's wonderful.
Well, I'm like buses, I sort of go to ground for weeks on end, and then I'll appear and do things in bunches. So yeah, it's coming soon, shall we say?
Brilliant. Thank you, mate, and thank you everyone for listening and partaking in this journey with me through the Stath filmography. That was the Expendables. Next up in a fortnight is The Mechanic, featuring the debut of Stath superfan Glyn, followed by something quite different, Romeo and Juliet, featuring the return of the Comics Emotion Zone star-crossed lovers, Mike and Megan, for anyone that is watching along. I've been I'm Jack's Musings, and that's JACS, and you can find me on Twitter where I am most active, or I guess I should say X nowadays. You can also contact the show directly on Twitter X under the name Back to the Filmog. Make sure you use the hashtag #FollowTheFilmography. I'm also a proud member of the aforementioned Comics Emotion family, a super place full of the world's greatest people, dedicated to bringing you podcasts on a variety of geeky topics. So please make sure you take the time to search, subscribe, and rate our shows whenever and wherever you listen. Until next time, be excellent to each other, and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers. Thank you, Bruce, for that one. cut.